Now, if you're looking at this guide, you're probably like me and didn't have a lot of luck following other people's information about how to get this cub to your camp. My first playthrough, I read something about how you needed to win the chicken chase in order to get the cub, which ended up not working for me at all. My second time through the game, determined to get the cub, I read a lot and found people having more success with refusing the game. Sure enough, I got the option to demand the cub from the goblin this time, and my Illithid power was up, so I brute forced my way to taking the cub. It still didn't work though, the cub never showed up, so after a lot of trial and error, I finally have it mostly sorted out, so please let me know if you're still having trouble with this. The first thing you need to do is find the Owlbear Den, which is right outside of the Blighted Village by the river. If you found Scratch the Dog, you're in the right area, just head closer to the water until you see the huge cave entrance. I've read that some people are able to talk to the cub while the mom is still alive, but in all of my games I've had to kill the mom. Since that is my main experience, I'm gonna say go ahead and kill the mom. Talk to the cub afterwards and spare it. It will begin to eat dear old mum and then you can leave. After a long rest, you can then head to the goblin camp. There you'll see the Owlbear Cub again being pestered by goblins. The ringleader Krolla will be talking about chicken chasing, but won't say any more until you get rid of Volo. Once his captor brings him back inside the keep, Krolla is ready for business. I've heard you can participate in the chicken chase and still get the same outcome, but I'll tell you that in my experience, the chicken chase isn't working all that well at current. I managed to pass the roll to get it to cheat at the race, but it didn't work right. It ran to the goal, but it didn't count. I spent a maddening amount of time on this race, and I'd say for the sake of your sanity, don't bother with it. It apparently works even if you lose, but I can't speak for that method. Instead, just tell Krolla you think the chicken chase is cruelty and bypass it completely. At this point, the cub will start running all over the camp. It's kind of a pain, but just click on it until you actually get the dialogue going. If you're a ranger, you can use Speak with Animals, but if you don't have access to that skill, you can just pass an animal handling check to offer the cub a place at your camp. Once you've successfully offered the invitation, the cub will express that it's interested, but it's still afraid of the goblins. Go back to Krolla and tell her you're taking the Owlbear Cub. The foolproof way to do this is with either your Illithid powers or by buying it outright. You can also pass other checks like Persuasion and Intimidation. However you get the cub away from Krolla's slimy mitts, you'll know that you've succeeded when they show this dialogue and the Owlbear Cub runs off. Now for the pain in the butt part that nobody talks about. I can't tell you how many times I skipped ahead waiting for the Owlbear Cub, even past completing the story. This thing never showed up, and so I had to start experimenting. Now, if you kill the goblin leaders before interacting with the Owlbear Cub, then it's gone forever. I did that on my first game, but on a reload of my first game that I kind of went back to after completing it, it showed up once I killed the goblin leaders. But in my second game, even after killing the leaders, it never showed up. Then I thought, what if I clear out the whole camp? To test it, I went back and killed them all, and wouldn't you know it, not that night, but the next night, the Owlbear Cub finally showed up. So if it doesn't show for you and it's been more than several nights, go to the goblin camp again and kill everything in the courtyard area by the waypoint. I actually left some goblins alive inside the keep, and it didn't seem to matter. But killing everything outside seemed to trigger the flag needed for the Owlbear Cub to make it to my camp. It might even be that killing Krolla is the trigger that somehow pushes the event forward, but it's hard to say because it seems really inconsistent. I mean, on one game it worked after killing the goblin leaders, if that even mattered, to tell you the truth, and on another game I killed the goblin leaders afterwards and it didn't count. Once the cub shows up at your camp, you can interact with it some more. You have some options without Speak with Animals, but in my case I just used my ranger's ability because I love hearing their silly simplistic voice.
Strong, big.
During the first visit, you have the option to feed the cub, along with some other choices. Know that once you pick a choice, though, the cub will run away and you won't get a follow-up that night. The next night, it will return, and this time it will have a wound. The rolls are pretty forgiving, or at least they were in my case. On other saves, I didn't record. I failed the first roll and passed the second one. You probably have to pass at least one to get the right outcome. The cub will run away again, and you'll have no more option to talk to it this night.
As the wound closes, the cub begins testing his weight on the leg.
Good. No hurt. Teeth, claws, bigger. Strong, fight, win. Too big. Wait, strong, show you.
The next night, the cub will return yet again, this time with a dead bird. Just like a cat, huh? So the best outcome here, in my experience, was to pretend to eat the bird, but stuff it in your bag. If you don't use animal speaking, you won't understand what the heck he wants, but he is trying to bring the food for you to eat because he thinks you're his friend. If you fail the sleight of hand check, he'll get mad and run off, saying you're not a friend and you're mean. If you pass the check, however, he'll be delighted, calling out, "Friend, like, eat." At this point, I was able to pet the owlbear cub, and it declared, "Friend, nice, no bite." Good job, little baby. I was so happy to finally get the owlbear cub to show up, though I was a little worried when the next night he was gone. And when he didn't show up the next night either, I began to wonder if I had messed something up. 4 nights went by, and it never came back. Granted, in my second game, I had already finished the refugee arc, and I have read that the owlbear cub tends to bug out after the celebration. Either way, it seems to be really touchy, so it should be getting fixed at some point. I was happy to eventually get it, but wasn't able to do much with it besides winning it over. It also doesn't seem to show up unless you actually spend your days doing things. I tried skipping days on consecutive games, I tried traveling around, I tried taking short rests, and it just didn't work to get this guy to show up. The triggers are incredibly difficult to figure out at this point because it doesn't even seem to be working properly. By all accounts, my ranger should have landed this cub permanently, but the celebration bug kills that prospect. There's always the chance that when the game is updated, that the cub will show up again in your camp too. At the very least, it's fun to see the advancement of friendship with this little guy, and the extra scenes that go along with it. Have you guys noticed any other triggers besides the ones I mentioned? I hunted a lot for information on this topic, and seemed to come up with the same answers over and over. That didn't really help much. So, I hope you guys can get somewhere with this guide. I'd also be curious to know if anyone's managed to keep the owlbear cub past the celebration. Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. See ya!